If you don't understand impermanent loss, you need to know about it. Otherwise, you could lose money when you're yield farming out there. And I know a lot of people want to know about yield farming, but a lot of people need to know about the risks of yield farming because it's a way to make passive income. And I'm making passive income. A lot of people I know, we're making a pretty good amount of money on various yield farms. But we have to be safe when we're doing it. And if you want to be safe, you need to understand the concept of impermanent loss. So by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what that is, how to defend yourself, and just what to look for before aping into a yield farm. And knowledge is power here. You really want to pay attention and understand what you're doing. Now, I've got a lot of previous videos about yield farming. I've got a course, hexpassiveincome.com. If you're brand new to crypto, that's more geared for you. All links in the description below. But I'm just going to give you the definition of impermanent loss. I've talked about it before. It's basically just losing money with liquidity providing. So as a liquidity provider, if you lose money by, you put in some money to the liquidity pool and you pull out some money later, you might pull out less US dollar value than you put in. So very simply, impermanent loss is just, when you put money in a liquidity pool and you take it back out one day, it becomes permanent loss because you could potentially lose money. So this is PulseX, and PulseX liquidity farms, if we go over here, right, to the liquidity pool, you guys have seen this before probably. And if you haven't, well, pay attention, okay? Because you could put up 10 million Pulse on one side. And look, notice how the other side of the equation will automatically calculate the equal dollar value that you need to put up on the other side. This is called symmetric liquidity. So if I want to put up 10 million PLS on one side of the Pulse HEX liquidity pair, for example, I have to put up 44,000 HEX. Because why? Because that's $534 of Pulse and $534 of HEX. And the website will calculate that for you automatically. And that's all you're doing when you're a liquidity provider, guys. When you are a liquidity provider, what you're doing is you're letting other people trade using your money. Okay, so the vast majority of people, they come to an exchange and they trade in and out of coins based on different liquidity pools. If somebody wants to exchange PulseX for PLS, they have to use this liquidity pool. And if someone wants to do the opposite, PLSX for Pulse, they also have to use this liquidity pool. But who's providing that liquidity? It's people that want to be liquidity providers. It's anybody that wants to be. It's educated people that are trying to make passive income like me and you over here. And we are putting up our liquidity and we're pooling it all together. And we're basically just letting other people trade using our money. So, if I put up 10 million HEX and 36 million PulseX, for example, and someone wants to come along and say, hey, I want to buy some Pulse and I want to pay some PulseX and I want to buy some Pulse. Well, essentially what they're doing is I'm becoming on the other side of the trade. I'm offering, hey, you can take some of my Pulse and I'll take your PulseX and I'll give you some of my Pulse. And it's getting divided up among all the liquidity providers. It's, it's crowdsourced liquidity. So I'm putting up maybe, $1,000 of liquidity here, and somebody else is putting up $10,000, and somebody else is putting up $15,000. And we've got all these individuals all over the world providing little bits of liquidity, and it adds up to millions and millions of dollars. So that way, when Joe Schmo comes along and wants to exchange, 100 PulseX for a little bit of Pulse, you could think of it like they're basically taking your Pulse and they're giving you their PulseX. Which means, let's say I made this liquidity pair right now. Let's say I put in 10 million PLS, and let's say I put in 36 million PulseX, okay? It's an equal number of both. Remember, $535 of both, because that's what you have to do on symmetric liquidity pools. It's 50-50, all right? I'm not going to pull out 10 million Pulse and 36 million PulseX. The moment I have this liquidity in this liquidity pair, it's volatile, right, guys? I'm pulling out, like one day when I want to pull this liquidity pair back out and receive my coins back, I am definitely not going to be pulling out an even 10 million Pulse and an even 36 million PulseX. I might pull out, 9 million Pulse, and I might pull out 40 million PulseX. What's going to happen is I'm going to end up with less of one coin and more of another coin. All right, and that's what liquidity providing is. You end up with less of the more expensive coin and more of the less expensive coin. And this happens temporarily, but the longer you leave your coins in there, the more you're protected because you're generating fees and INC rewards and all this stuff. Time in liquidity pools also matters. People don't realize that liquidity providing is also a passive strategy. Now, it's a little bit more active than, HEX staking, for example. The HEX staking ladder is still going to be the most passive strategy you can really do. I mean, it doesn't get any more passive than a long-term, multi-year HEX staking ladder. Just good old-fashioned HEX staking. That's set it and forget it. You don't have to worry. Liquidity providing is still, I would call it still passive income, but it's a little less passive than just HEX staking, right? So you should be checking up on your yield farms maybe every couple of weeks. But for the most part, you just leave it in there for many, many months. 3 months, 6 months minimum, assuming that you picked a good liquidity pair. And the idea is to just sit in these things for a long time so you can rack up the yield. You can rack up the yield token. You can rack up the trading fees. And the more time you spend in these, the more your impermanent loss risk is mitigated. So you don't want to just be hopping around from pool to pool. And, this week you're in one liquidity pool and next week you just hop to the new one. If you're chasing these things like shiny objects, you're way more likely to get impermanent loss than if you just pick one liquidity pool that's safe, that you like both the coins, and you just sit in there, okay? So, if I put this amount of money into the liquidity pool today and I try to pull it out in 1 week only, I might pull out, 9,000 Pulse, and that Pulse just went up in USD value, and I might pull out, 40 million PulseX, and it's like, oh, yay, I made some PulseX tokens. Sure, but it might be the case that PulseX went down in value. So on the short term, the prices are volatile. And if Pulse goes up in price and PulseX goes down in price, even if I pull out a higher number of PulseX coins, let's say I pull out 40 million instead of 36 million, but I only pull out 9 million Pulse instead of 10 million, I have, less of the more expensive coin and more of the less expensive coin, right? That's what impermanent loss is. The shorter you're in there, if you try to pull it out after 1 week or 2 weeks, you want to leave it in there real long. You don't just want to be pulling it out real quick, all right? So impermanent loss becomes permanent when you pull out. When you pull your coins out, that's when impermanent loss becomes permanent. So again, you don't just want to be an ADD brain about this, okay? You don't just want to be chasing yield farms. And one more thing too, if some yield farm comes along and it's saying, we've got 500% APY over here, you don't just ape into that yield farm just because it's got 500% APY. Why? Well, number one, I've talked about this in previous videos. I talk about it in my course, but the yield always gets diluted over time. So in general, the APY percentage that you see quoted on the screen, like when you go to the farms tab over here and you see 58% APY, wow. Guess what, guys? In 1 year, it's not going to be as high as it is now. So the APY always goes down over time, slowly maybe, but because more people are coming in and diluting the pool, yield farm APYs start off really high and they go really low. So don't be surprised if, you see some random new yield farm pop up and they're saying, we're giving you 600% APY. And then, 1 month from now, it's down to like 30% APY. And especially don't be chasing these yield farms if it's 2 poop coins, okay? Because if these 2 poop coins go down in price, let's say you got poop coin A and poop coin B, and some yield farm is saying, we're going to pay you 500% APY if you join the yield farm of poop coin 1 and poop coin 2. Well, guess what? If poop coin 1 and 2 go down and they dip 50%, it doesn't matter if you're making 500% APY. The APY is not going to be enough to make up for the fact that the coins you're holding are garbage and just going down in value forever. It doesn't matter how much APY you're making yearly. Like 508% APY can't even save you. And as we know, the 500% APY is not sustainable either. So it might sound cool at first. It might look cool on the screen, but just don't be aping into these random new yield farms that pop up and think about what the coins are inside the farm. Are they coins that you actually want to hold? Right now, I'm bullish, for example, on PulseX, Pulse, and HEX. So I don't mind. Like currently, I'm in this yield farm and this yield farm, HEX Pulse and PulseX Pulse. Why? Because I don't care which coins I temporarily end up with more or less of. I can deal with the day-to-day volatility. I don't care if one day I wake up and Pulse is outperforming PulseX, or one day maybe HEX is outperforming Pulse, because I predict, and I'm taking a bet here, right? I'm speculating. I don't know this, but I'm predicting that they're all going to be kind of going up and down together, but in the long run that they're going to go up and to the right. So whether or not Pulse is the popular kid today and HEX is the popular kid tomorrow, I don't have to care and micromanage my liquidity farms, and I don't have to scare myself and shake myself out because, oh my God, I have less HEX now and I have more Pulse, but Pulse just went up a whole bunch in price. I can just chill out and say, that's all right. I have more HEX and I have less Pulse today, but tomorrow I might have more Pulse and less HEX. And it all is going to hopefully kind of even itself out over 6 months, 1 year, 2 years of time, okay? I'm in these for the long term, and I'm bullish on them over the long term. And although there's some more advanced strategies, yes, you can get advanced and you can pair stable coins, or you could pair Ethereum to Pulse, or stable coins to Pulse. There are different ways of playing this, but for the average basic beginner, you don't just want to ape into every yield farm just because it's there, just because you see a new shiny high number over there. Think about, do you actually want to hold the coins? Do you think they're both going up? And would you care if temporarily you have more of one coin and less of another coin? Like, would you really care? I don't care because I want all these coins to go up. I don't care if I'm currently collecting more PulseX or more Pulse. I'm pretty confident that when I pull this liquidity out one day, I'm just going to have more of both coins because my INC rewards plus the fees, plus the fact that the price on both hopefully went up so much, It's going to outweigh any short-term impermanent loss. So let's go over an example, okay? Let's say you've got, in a perfect utopia world, okay? Let's say you've got HEX is $1, PLS is 1 penny. Visualize it, guys. Visualize it. This could happen one day. It's very realistic. Everyone's going to live forever. Elon Musk sent everyone to Mars, and it's a perfect world. Nobody has to pay taxes anymore, and HEX is $1 and PulseChain's a penny. It could happen, guys. I know it's a utopia, but it's an example, all right? Now, let's say you put up $1,000 on both sides of the liquidity pair. So you put up $1,000 on both sides. Remember, what does that look like? Well, it would just look like you're providing liquidity over here, and you choose, the Pulse HEX pair. And, you've got about $1,000 of Pulse on one side and $1,000 of HEX on the other side, right? So I'm just using these prices as an example, okay? So $1,000 of HEX would be 1,000 HEX, and $1,000 worth of Pulse would be 100,000 Pulse, okay? So you've just put up, in this imaginary scenario, follow along with me here, you've put up 1,000 HEX and 100,000 PLS. So you've got, in your liquidity pool, you've got 1,000 HEX in there and 100,000 PLS in there. Now let's say HEX does a 5x returns ROI. It already went up to $1. Okay, so why not? Let's just call it 5 more X's from there. It's easily possible, guys, easily possible. So yay, if HEX did a 5x, amazing, everyone's rich, all right? Now let's say Pulse only does a 2x. Oh no, woe is me, it only did a 2x after it already went to a penny, right? Come on, if PLS is at a penny, we're all going to be partying on the rooftops. But HEX does a 5x and PLS only, does a 2x. So now, what are the current prices? We're sitting at $5 HEX and 2 penny Pulse. What a beautiful world this is, right? Now, when you pull out your liquidity pool, your liquidity position, you're only actually pulling out 632 HEX and 158,000 PLS. So you're pulling out less HEX than you started with. Remember, you started with 1,000 HEX. You're only pulling out 632 HEX. But you're pulling out more PLS. Okay, what does that mean? You're pulling out more of the coin that went up less. You're pulling out less of the coin that went up more. Why? Because HEX was the popular kid. HEX was the prom king, and nobody wanted to sit with little old PLS over here. Okay, they all bullied him. They stole his lunch money, all right? Paul still did very good in this situation, but because HEX was the more popular coin, everybody was saying, hey, give me all that HEX, and here, take my Pulse. I'm going to trade my Pulse for HEX. And so you, as the liquidity provider, you took the other side of that trade. You said, give me your Pulse, fellow traders, and I will give you my HEX in return. That's virtually what you're doing when you're a liquidity provider. So because you were giving away all your HEX and taking everybody's Pulse, because everybody wanted to go, from Pulse into HEX because that was the popular thing to do, you're doing what is temporarily unpopular. And that's okay. On a long enough time scale, that's okay. Stay with me, I'll tell you why. But again, you're pulling out less of the more popular coin and more of the less popular coin. And the total value of these coins now today is $6,300. So congratulations, you pulled out 6.3K. But what would have happened if you didn't join the liquidity pool at all? If you kept it simple, you didn't overthink, and you just held the actual coins in your wallet, which, guys, 80% of the time, people are better off doing this, okay? If people don't know what they're doing and they go in blind, or they have short-term thinking, or if it's going to keep you up at night with anxiety about you can't sleep at night because you're thinking about nightmares of impermanent loss, just chill out. You don't have to do any of that, because guess what, guys? If you didn't do liquidity providing and this just happened anyway, let's say you just held that 1,000 HEX and that 100,000 PLS, and then the price did a 5x and a 2x. Well, guess what? Your 1,000 HEX is now worth $5,000, and your 100,000 PLS is now worth $2,000. 5,000 plus 2,000 is 7,000. So if you're just sitting on your butt, doing nothing at all and chilling out and not overthinking, you could have made more money than you did in the liquidity pool. Now, in the liquidity farm, you were also earning INC token, okay? You were also earning fees, okay? We didn't talk about this yet. We didn't talk about the yield farm reward token and the fees. So you would hope that the INC and the fees were enough to offset the impermanent loss. Basically, you would be hoping that you made at least $700 worth of INC and fees combined to make up for the fact that just by sitting on your ass and doing nothing, you would have kept $7,000 worth of value if you just kept that 1,000 HEX and you kept that 100,000 PLS. Okay, if you kept it simple, you would have made more money, all things equal. Now, in reality, with INC and fees, and also, we should say, also with time, the more time you spend in a liquidity pool, the more INC and fees you add up, and it helps you to offset this impermanent loss. But so you lost. Your impermanent loss became permanent loss. Remember, it became permanent because you pulled out this much. If you left it in, maybe you'd still be earning yield. And if you left it in for 6 more months, who knows? Maybe you'd have more HEX one day and you'd have less PLS, because maybe the tables would turn. Maybe in the next 3 months, Pulse becomes the popular kid. Maybe everybody decides they don't like HEX anymore for that 3 months. So you're just taking the opposite side of the trade. But again, when you pulled out, you used the pullout method and you did it a little too early. You pull out a little too early. You actually lost 9.6% as opposed to just holding. Now, how did I do all the math? I didn't really actually do it on a calculator. I used this handy impermanent loss calculator. So follow along with me over here. The link is in the description below. But remember, guys, let's say token A is HEX, token B is Pulse, right? And remember, let's say HEX, let's think that HEX is $1 and PLS is 1 penny, all right? And now we have to imagine what the future price would be. We don't know for sure, so we're all speculating here. So imagine HEX jumps up to $5 and PLS goes up to 2 pennies. They both go up, right? So you're like, okay, great, this is awesome. They both go up. But aside from the INC that hopefully you've earned, and aside from the fees that you've earned, if you weren't earning any fees or any INC token, your impermanent loss, remember, is 9.6%. So I just calculated, you can use this impermanent loss calculator to play around with some future numbers and speculate, well, what if, this token went to this price and this token went to that price? And you could see how good or bad things might be. But look, remember, if you just held $1,000 of both tokens, you'd have a total portfolio value of $7,000. But because you wanted to play around and because you pulled out your impermanent loss, it became permanent. Now you have $6,300. So again, hopefully the I and C coin, the yield farm coin, plus the trading fees that you're earning over, time. Remember, these factors, they add more money to your simple liquidity position. So you would hope that these factors made it so that this 6,300 is actually more than, 7,000. And this is in a perfect world, right? Where both coins went up. Both coins went up in this situation, right? Can you imagine if one coin went up and one coin went down? I mean, then it gets really bad, right, guys? So you want to pick pairs. That's what I mean when you want to be bullish on both coins in the pair. You want to hope that you pick the right pairs, because I'm pretty sure that maybe Pulse and HEX will go up in the future. Great. One might temporarily go up more than the other, and the other might temporarily, depending on the month, it's like seasonality. What if one coin went down? Okay, what if HEX went to $5 over here, but what if Pulse dropped from 1 penny to half a penny, right? What would happen then? If one coin goes up and one coin goes down in USD value, oh my gosh, look, my impermanent loss is 42%. My impermanent loss just 4x, it quadrupled. My impermanent loss is huge now because one coin went up and the other coin went down. All right, in my previous example, both coins went up and I still lost money anyway. So it's exponentially worse if one coin goes up and one coin goes down. Why? Again, you end up with more of the coin that went down and less of the coin that went up. So you really want to be careful about coins that you pick. Now, how do you defend yourself from impermanent loss? Let's go over some examples. Again, like I've been saying throughout this whole video and previous videos, and I go really in depth in hexpassiveincome.com, course links in the description below. You've got to be bullish on both coins in the pair, okay? And you got to pick a pair where the ratio is range bound. Let's go over this really, really quickly, okay? Really, really quickly. What I like to do is I like to go over here and I like to just use the PulseX pair on dexscreener.com, okay? So follow along with me if you want. Why do I like to use this? It's got a very high liquidity on this pair, 27 million. So we click on the PulseX Pulse pair, all right? And what it's going to default you to is, first of all, I hate the 5-minute chart. I hate that it does that. Go on the daily chart like a normal person, okay? Let's not play around on 5-minute charts. And look, this is the chart, okay? But this is the US dollar chart. So Dex Screener will default you to show you US dollars. Look at the y-axis. The y-axis is showing you the USD price. So we care more about the ratio price. How do we get the ratio price? You click this button up here. Look where my mouse is. Look, this button right up here will switch to the ratio price. So we switch to the price in PLS terms, and that will give us the ratio price. And now we can see that the price of PulseX to Pulse is roughly, PulseX is roughly worth between 1/4 of a pulse and 1/2 of a pulse. And it's bouncing around. And what I'd want to see, what I would hope for, if I'm liquidity providing on this particular pool, is I would hope that, what's currently happening is that it looks like we're bouncing off of this range. And then what I would want to see is the price continue to bounce around in this range somehow, kind of right in between here, right? And then when I eventually pull out my liquidity position, let's say I put my liquidity position smack dab in the middle. Let's say I entered my LP position right here. Your entry point matters too. So let's say I entered kind of halfway in between this range. Ideally, I would want to exit one day, whether that's 1 year from now or 18 months from now, 2 years from now. when I exit my liquidity position, I'd still ideally in a perfect world want it to be kind of right at the same ratio that I got in at. If I put my liquidity position in here and I pull it out here, I'm going to have a lot of impermanent loss. But if I put my position in here and I pull it out here, I'm not going to have much impermanent loss because you want the ratio to keep bouncing around within that range. Now also, time. Okay, you need to stay in the pair long enough to outweigh impermanent loss. If you're switching pairs every 2 weeks, you're not even paying attention to what ratio you got in at, and you're not paying attention to, what coins are actually in the pair. You're just chasing, poop coins with a bunch of APR on it for today. There's always going to be the new hot yield farm, the shiny object to distract you. So stay in these pairs for many, many months if you want to outweigh impermanent loss, because you want to rack up that INC token or that BBC or that PHUX or whatever the yield reward token is. It's different on every yield farm, right? But you want to make sure you're in there long enough to rack up enough coins that you do outweigh any impermanent loss, and you rack up enough trading fees that you do outweigh any impermanent loss. Okay, remember guys, it's reward token plus fees plus time. These 3 factors will help you to outweigh your impermanent loss, guys. And of course, as we know, guys, abstinence, celibacy, abstinence is the only option that's 100% safe and effective, okay? So how do we defend against that? Well, you don't have to do yield farming at all, okay? You don't have to do yield farming at all. If you don't understand what you're doing or if it's too scary, take your time. Learn about this. Knowledge is literally power. Go watch my old videos. Other people have tons of videos about it too. People like Axis Alive, they go really deep into explaining yield farming. I talk about it in my course. You can even join my Patreon. I answer people's one-on-one questions. Very responsive in Patreon. We've got a group over there. And you can ask me about more complex yield farming, potential strategies and stuff like that. But you don't have to do it. And if you're not pretty confident of your strategy of, okay, I'm going to hold for 6 months and I'm going to join this particular yield pair because I'm bullish on both coins, and I think the ratio is going to bounce around between this range. If you're going in blind, sometimes you might be better off just not doing anything at all. So guys, if you found this valuable, make sure you like, subscribe, share the video, leave a comment. All that stuff helps PulseChain, HEX, and PulseX go viral. It all pumps the algorithm, and it helps me, helps you, pump all of our bags. So I'll see you on the next video.